I finally watched Saltburn. Is it as steamy as I thought it would be? Let's talk about it. What's up, Flick fans? Welcome back to the channel. Emerald Fennell is back with her brand new film. It's Saltburn. I like the trailer. I think Barry Keoghan is awesome. I can't wait to talk about this. But did it live up to the hype? So a student at Oxford University finds himself drawn into the world of a charming and aristocratic classmate who invites him to his eccentric family's sprawling estate for a summer never to be forgotten. Like I said, directed by Emerald Fennell. This movie is definitely rated R.
Drop it like it's hot.
There's strong sexual content, graphic nudity, language, disturbing violent content, and drug use. I didn't expect about half of those things. I knew there would be a lot of sexual content just from the talk surrounding one specific scene, and oh yeah, it's definitely in there, but beyond that, this film pushes so many different boundaries when it comes to characterizations, how they portray various characters, the commentary on wealth, the numerous subplots that each try to tackle something different. I have to say, I respect this film. I have my issues, we'll talk about those, but I love the fact that she went for something that, frankly, doesn't feel like it's been done before. It's two different types of films, and it all doesn't necessarily come together perfectly, but I do appreciate the attempt, and it's not often that we get a movie this original. That's a good thing. I want to start with the highlight. That's Barry Keoghan as Oliver. Oliver is a fascinating character. This is one of the more layered characters I've seen in any movie this year because you're not necessarily sure where he falls on any subject or at any point in the movie, if he's even telling the truth or not. He's so mysterious. As a character, there's so much to him that you don't know at the beginning, and frankly, I didn't even really know at the end, to be honest with you, but that made for a very interesting arc and a very interesting journey, and from start to finish, he's compelling. So when he meets Felix, Jacob Elordi's character, who is also interesting, but there's much less to him, you kind of know where he comes from, and you understand his mindset and mentality. And there's this stigma of, oh, like, he's the rich guy, and pretty much everyone that goes to this school, it kind of feels that way. Archie Madekwe, who's having a really good year, by the way, plays a very similar character, and someone who is also at Saltburn when Oliver gets the invitation, basically saying, hey, we know you have nowhere else to go because of the very tough situation that you're coming from, so come with us to Saltburn, experience, well, some interesting things.
This is personal.
And it becomes very apparent as we get into the second act of this movie that Oliver, he has an obsession. At the beginning, you believe it's solely for Felix, but as we meet the rest of his family, we'll talk about the cast, and as we start to get a grasp on the life that they're living and how open and free Saltburn would make anyone feel from any background, and Oliver is starting to really feel that as we go through. It becomes more apparent that maybe it's not just Felix. Is it Felix and his family? Is it more his family and less Felix? Or is it just Saltburn in its entirety? And there is an aesthetic when we get to this mansion and this estate and, you know, all of the beauty that is brought out by the awesome cinematography and the gorgeous production design and really all of the technical elements of this movie, even the score, it works extremely well. But when we get there, there's this magic to it that our character Oliver is feeling, and you can't help but to kind of feel yourself being swept away, even though the narrative surrounding his story specifically does start to go in different directions that I didn't think were necessary. I felt as if the focus was not necessarily where it needed to be as we get into the middle portion of this movie, and I think part of my problem is the mystery surrounding his character at the beginning that was so intriguing, and by the time you get to the end of the film, there are still questions to be asked, absolutely, but the movie begins to, instead of just allowing you to figure things out by yourself, it begins to feed you this information. And it wasn't all that bad in the beginning, but by the time we get to the end, I can't help but to feel like the resolution could have been a lot more satisfying if we weren't just given everything and nothing was left up to interpretation, if that makes sense. And I, for one, I'm going to stand on the fact that the ending, the final scene and sequence with Keoghan's character, with Oliver, was awesome. That's a little awkward, to be honest with you, but it's awesome in the way it's executed, and there is this haunting, crazy feeling that you have while watching.
What the f*** is this?
It was frankly really impressive because Fennell was able to bring that out of this experience. And the third act of this movie is way more rousing and interesting than the second act. I keep talking about the second act like it's, it's a bad series of events, and it's not that, right? We get those scenes that everybody's talking about and some moments that'll make your brain explode like, okay, that just happened. And they're shocking. I'll give the movie that, but prior to that tipping point, I was getting a little bothered by the pacing of this film. It just wasn't necessarily hitting the beats I needed it to hit. And when we go from the campus to Saltburn, there is a series of events that will sweep you away aesthetically, but there wasn't much in terms of story. I'm not going to say I was getting bored, but I just wasn't all that invested in those moments. And I'm thinking to myself, where's this movie going? Because you have such an interesting character in Oliver, you have to give me something here. And then the movie starts to give you something, and it really delivers in those moments. But again, as we start to wrap up all of these story points, instead of leaving things to the viewer, it's more so just feeding you this information. And I do wish I felt some sense of mystery by the time we got to the end of the movie, because I really didn't feel that way. It wrapped everything up, and a lot of people are going to love that ending, and I loved that final scene. I just feel like the script could have had a bit more ambiguity to it. Now, maybe general audiences wouldn't have liked that as much, but it wasn't as compelling as I needed it to be, and the dialogue was just a little bit on the nose. Now, all of that being said, I talk about Barry Keoghan's performance. It is one of the best performances I've seen this year. I would put him at least in my top 10, pushing that number 5. He's not going to get a Best Actor nomination. I don't think he is, but there is a chance by the end of the year I'll say, yeah, he should. Elordi is good. Richard E. Grant, Rosamund Pike, they play Felix's parents. They're kind of what you expect them to be when he arrives at Saltburn, but it still works so well. And both of their personalities, the way that they play these characters, and when we get to a couple of sequences that are very emotional towards the end of the movie, especially looking at the way Richard E. Grant handles these scenes, it was unnerving. There's a scene where they're all at a dinner table and the windows are being covered. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That was an awesome scene. So as you can tell, I'm a little up and down on the story as a whole. As an experience, I wish I would have responded to it a bit better. There were just certain points in the movie where I don't know if it was the pacing or just not being as interested in what's going on screen. I just wasn't as captivated as I needed to be. That being said, the shocking moments, the performance from Barry Keoghan, that is what elevates this to, I believe, a movie that's at least worth watching, if not worth watching in a theater. But before I give you my score, let me know your thoughts down below. Did you like Saltburn? Were you a little disappointed like I was? And what about that scene, man? Saltburn features immaculate cinematography and some outstanding performances. It's unnerving and has this fearlessness to it, but the story doesn't entirely work. It lacks the subtlety necessary to deliver the rousing conclusion it strives for. Still, it has its moments. That's important, and I'm interested to see what you all say about the movie, about the ending. I mean, the ending, man, there's a lot to it. One shot, that's just, it could be iconic when it comes to movies that came out this year. Thank you so much for watching. I have a lot of reviews coming, man. I'm seeing Poor Things, The Boy and the Heron, maybe Wonka. I don't know. We'll see. See you soon.